Israeli Prime Minister Binyamin Netanyahu visited Egypt, looking to build a coalition against Iran and discuss his ideas on advancing Middle East peace. Was it merely an exchange of views among allies, or an attempt by both former enemies to score points with the new US administration? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Imran Garda. It's already been a busy week for Israel's controversial leader Binyamin Netanyahu. On Monday morning, he received the leader of the Catholic Church, who was in the region promoting cross-religious relations. On the same day, he traveled to Egypt for a very different kind of diplomatic visit. Netanyahu has met with Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. On the agenda, Iran's nuclear proliferation, the ongoing Arab-Israeli conflict, the situation in Gaza, as well as how to free Gilad Shalit, the captured Israeli soldier held by Hamas. Well, in his joint press conference with Mubarak, Netanyahu did not go into detail about how his administration would go about negotiating peace.
We would like, as soon as possible, to renew the peace talks between us and the Palestinians, and I hope that they will be renewed in the next few weeks. The struggle in the Middle East is a struggle between peoples and not between religions. It is a struggle between moderates and extremists. It is a struggle between those who are asking for life and those who want death.
Well, we don't know what was said behind closed doors, but there's likely to have been a stark contrast between these talks and similar ones with the previous Israeli administration. Netanyahu has refused to agree to a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian dispute, as proposed in the US-brokered roadmap to peace. He's also against the complete cessation of settlement building. And his foreign minister has declared that Israel is not bound by the 2007 Annapolis Agreement that saw Ehud Olmert and Mahmoud Abbas agree to negotiate. Well, joining us now are our guests in Cairo, Imad Gad. He's head of the Israel unit at the Al-Ahram Center for Political and Strategic Studies. In Jerusalem, Dan Diker, a senior analyst at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. And in Washington, D.C., David Mack, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, a scholar at the Middle East Institute, and of course a former US ambassador. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us, gentlemen. Mr. Gad, if I could start off with you, what did Egypt want from Israel?
Egypt wants from Israel to recognize the previous agreements or the previous understanding, Annapolis, also the roadmap, and wants from Netanyahu to recognize directly and clearly the solution of two-state or the two-state solution, and to do what he can in order to resume the negotiation concerning releasing Gilad Shalit and to reach to a new ceasefire in order to help the Palestinian factions in order to reach to their unity government.
Okay, let's look at the other side. Mr. Diker, when Netanyahu went to Egypt, what exactly did Israel want?
Well, first of all, Mr. Netanyahu accepted the honor that was bestowed upon him by His Excellency President Mubarak to come to Egypt, especially before Mr. Netanyahu goes to Washington to meet President Obama next week. This was very much, in my assessment, welcomed by Jerusalem, because Mr. Netanyahu recognizes that the Republic of Egypt and Mr. Mubarak are the strongest leaders in the region, and Mr. Netanyahu, in my assessment, went to Egypt in order to cooperate and listen to the president's concerns, which go beyond the Palestinian issue. Certainly the Palestinian-Israeli issue is very, very important, but it goes far beyond that. Both Egypt and Israel are being directly threatened by the Islamic Republic of Iran and their proxies Hezbollah and Hamas, which have now threatened the life of Mr. Mubarak, are threatening the Egyptian regime, and they are threatening Israel through their surrogate Hamas in Gaza, the Hezbollah from the north, and Iranian proxies in the West Bank, including Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade. So both leaders had a very strong set of interests to discuss that both include the Palestinian issue, twinned with the much larger strategic threat that Iran poses to both nations and indeed the entire Sunni establishment in the Middle East.
Ambassador Mack, is this just fear-mongering, this Iranian threat that Mr. Diker is mentioning?
Well, if Netanyahu actually thinks that he's going to be able to get the Obama administration to take the easy way out on the Palestinian issue by portraying this need for a common front against an Iranian threat, then he's in for a very sad disillusionment when he comes to Washington. The U.S. is actually quite close, I believe, to the Egyptian position as explained by Imran Gad regarding the need for major changes in the way Israel deals with the Palestinian Authority, not these cosmetic steps that Prime Minister Netanyahu has hinted at. There's going to have to be an acceptance of the two-state solution, of the roadmap, Annapolis agreements. These are all part of what the United States is going to insist upon. And in return, if Israel takes these steps, it will make it possible to have a stronger regional position regarding a threat from a country like Iran. And there's the whole promise that both President Mubarak and King Abdullah of Jordan have been talking about, with a peace between Israel and not only the Palestinians and its immediate Arab neighbors, but also with the wider Muslim world. But Israel is going to have to deal with the Palestinian situation first and foremost.
Yeah, Mr. Diker, a couple of fair points, I would think, made by David Mack. I mean, if we're talking about an Iranian threat, Iran doesn't have any nuclear weapons. Israel is estimated to have over 250. Iran doesn't occupy any of its neighbors. Israel occupies Palestinian, Syrian and Lebanese land. Surely Israel should be more of a regional threat than Iran.
Well, I think, first of all, we've got to straighten out the facts. I think that, unfortunately, there's developed some sort of mythology in the State Department that the Palestinian issue is the source of Arab and Muslim grievance in the Middle East, when in fact it is today. Iran is undermining every single country in the Middle East. Ambassador Mack knows that very well. And in fact, it's clear that perhaps my colleagues haven't spent that much time in the West Bank. I happen to be there every single week, and I see what's going on there. And if you want to push the Palestinians to suicide, the thing to do now would be to push them again, as the United States did during Annapolis, which the Palestinian Authority did not want to do because it was not prepared to enter into political negotiations. It has not been able to secure its areas against Iranian penetration.
I'd just like to challenge you on that, because you say there's evidence in the West Bank of Iranian influence. I'd like you to qualify that statement, because in the West Bank there's just evidence of an Israeli occupation, a brutal occupation with checkpoints, with settlements, with a wall that cuts through Palestinian land. Where's the evidence of Iranian influence?
Well, let me just correct your misstatements of fact. First of all, the brutal occupation you're talking about it occurs that the Palestinian Authority controls 98% of the lives of all Palestinians in the West Bank. They receive tens of millions of dollars per month from the State of Israel. The Palestinian Authority is as you know, unfortunately suffers from some of the worst corruption and terrorism themselves of any entity in the Middle East. We know for a fact from our former head of Central Command, who said publicly on the record that Hezbollah cells have been found in the West Bank. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is a unit of the Revolutionary Guards, is throughout the West Bank, specifically in Jenin, as is the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade. The Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade in the Arab press 2 weeks ago admitted publicly that they are wholly supported by the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is the problem of the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority has been unable to secure their own areas, and at the same time, Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas, has been completely discredited by the Palestinian public, which is why the Hamas has become so popular. It's not because Israel had been forced to go back into the Palestinian areas after the Intifada terror war of 2000, but in fact, Hamas and its program of reform, has become much more popular, certainly after the Gaza war, and the Palestinian Authority under Mahmoud Abbas and Salam Fayyad have been completely discredited on the Palestinian street, having absolutely nothing to do with Israel.
Talking about being discredited, Imad Gad in Cairo, do you feel that Egypt has a perception problem within the broader Arab world? Just the very symbolism of Netanyahu and Mubarak meeting, shaking hands, sharing pleasantries. Do you think this will widen and deepen this so-called Arab Cold War at this moment in time between those who are allied to the United States and who have a peace deal with Israel and those who don't?
I think the Israeli government, Netanyahu himself, wants to speak about what he called the cold peace or Arab cold peace. I think there are many divisions between Arab countries, but the mainstream in Arab countries, moderate Arab countries, wants to resume negotiations, and Mubarak's regime cannot speak or cannot repeat Netanyahu, what in mind of Netanyahu. I mean, we must work together against Iran. I think the Egyptian public opinion, the Egyptian government cannot deal with this statement because, yes, there is some problems between, or difficulties between Iran and Egypt, but till now we cannot speak about an Israeli-Egyptian work against Iran, because I think the Egyptian point of view is very close to the American administration point of view. The Israeli side must resume negotiation, must apply the Annapolis agreements first of all, and after that this will minimize the influence of the extremists in the region and will minimize the influence of Iran. So till now we cannot speak about this issue as the Israeli side is speaking about.
Okay, let's look at this a bit deeper. Annapolis Peace Conference, the Roadmap for Peace, the Arab Initiative. After decades of talk and no results, does peace really stand a chance in the region? Netanyahu is due to meet Barack Obama next week in Washington. The Obama administration has pledged to work vigorously to jumpstart the stalled peace process and has been fairly clear of its expectations.
I will say this, that I believe that peace in the Middle East is possible. I think it will be based on two states, side by side, a Palestinian state and a Jewish state. I think in order to achieve that, both sides are going to have to make compromises.
But Israel has to work toward a two-state solution. You're not going to like my saying this, but not build more settlements, dismantle existing outposts, and allow the Palestinians freedom of movement based on their first actions, access to economic opportunity, and increase security responsibility. This is a show-me deal.
But the American efforts risk running against the new Israeli government's hardline policies. Interesting there, we were listening to Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Ambassador Mack, can we expect some sort of showdown on May the 18th when Binyamin Netanyahu meets with Barack Obama?
Well, it's pretty clear that when you're quoting President Obama and Vice President Biden, you're not quoting some lower-level fanatic Arabists in the State Department, as Dan Diker might have been inclined to suggest. This commitment to a two-state solution is not something coming from the State Department. It's something that very clearly comes from the American political system, including the great majority of the American Jewish community, which is tired of the right-wing and feckless kind of policies that have been coming out of some of the traditional leaders of the Jewish community. They're looking for leadership. They want to have a peaceful settlement with the Israeli people as well as with the Palestinian people as well as their other neighbors. And it's quite clear that the Obama administration feels it has good, strong domestic support for insisting not upon any steps that are going to make Israel less secure, but upon steps that are going to assure Israel's long-term security as a country that is militarily the strongest in the region, but that has a strong peace partner among the Palestinians and Arab neighbors like Egypt, which has kept a peace with Israel for years, and Jordan, which has a solid peace relationship with Israel, moving on to Israel's other Arab neighbors, and then a wider circle, as has been promised really by the Arab League Peace Initiative, endorsed once again, backed up quite recently by King Abdullah bin Hussein of Jordan. We're going to see, I think, some serious talking to the Israelis, not just about the dangers that are ahead if they keep on with sterile policies of occupation, but also the opportunities that exist for Israel to become a truly secure and accepted part of the Middle East.
Dan Dijker in Jerusalem, do you fear that the special relationship may not be so special anymore, and the unequivocal support, as has been perceived sometimes from the U.S., may not last for Israel?
No, Israel is a very strong ally of the United States, and sometimes allies have tensions and disagreements. I would just point out, though, to those in the United States who would suggest that Israel's right-wing policies or the right-wing policies of some of Israel's friends in the United States, Israel itself, much to the surprise of the United States, was the initiator and the driver of the last 5 peace processes that failed. Israel drove Oslo I, Oslo II, Camp David, the Taba agreements, the roadmap, as well as Annapolis, which was not an agreement, I might correct you. It was not an agreement. It was a process that ended up in complete failure by the most left-leaning government in Israel's history, and that's by far. And there was not one agreement, unfortunately, between President Abbas and Prime Minister Olmert on any one of the issues. So anyone who wants to claim that Israel has not taken extraordinary risk for peace should really reconsider that thought, because this country, especially after Gaza, has learned that when you evacuate territory, lock, stock, and barrel, including every last settler and every last member of the Israeli Defense Forces from Gaza, we should have had Hong Kong in the Middle East. And I think that President Obama and Vice President Biden and Ambassador Mack and many of the other good folks in Washington
come on,
that
Mr.
Iran has now
let's be serious. You can't have Hong Kong
in Gaza
if you control the airspace, the sea space, the borders, everything that goes in and out, including pasta. Come on, be serious now.
And does the United States control the airspace when it's threatened from its southern border or over its northern border? Of course it would. Israel, as any other sovereign country, has the right to defend itself. Let's be very clear. Israel suffered 10,000 rocket attacks, which was a 600% increase over the rocket attacks between 2000 and 2005. When it withdrew in 2005, it absorbed 10,000 rocket attacks against its civilian population. My dear friends, there hasn't been such an example of an assault against the population of any country since the Second World War. And therefore, the Israeli public, which is fully behind Mr. Netanyahu, believes that it must defend itself. At the same time, there has been a radical shift in the Israeli body politic, including Mr. Netanyahu, whom I can say authoritatively is absolutely committed to a peaceful resolution of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict.
Okay.
Let me just move this on. I think that it has to be reconsidered.
Let me just move this back to the Egyptian perception of this new government. The former Egyptian Foreign Minister Ahmed Maher believes there is, ironically, a better chance of achieving peace with the current right-wing Israeli government. He said, and I quote, "I personally believe that we have a better chance with such a government because this government cannot pretend that it is moderate and as such cannot automatically win the goodwill of the American administration, particularly this new American administration that is offering the world a nicer face of the US. So maybe this makes our job easier. The ugly face of the ugly Israelis who are now in government will make it more difficult for countries like the US or Europe to stand with Israel, even if they sympathize with it. We can take advantage of this. At the same time, we can bring the Palestinians together." Imad Gad in Cairo, what do you make of what your former foreign minister said?
I think because he has the experience of the first Netanyahu government between 1996 till 1999, and addition factor, we have now Victor Lieberman as a foreign minister, and we know the statements and the point of view and the vision of Lieberman. So that's why Egypt refused to receive or to invite Lieberman. I think the current coalition cannot resume negotiation. They will try to concentrate on another issues like the Iranian threat, as the Israeli speaker said. So I think the Egyptian point of view is waiting for another coalition. I mean, perhaps they expect that after the meeting between Netanyahu and Obama, perhaps there will be a chance to annex Kadima to the Israeli government. Then, if we deal with the current Israeli government, we believe that we cannot reach to any kind of agreements, and they will continue in dealing with the Palestinians from a very narrow point of view. And I think also the Egyptian-Israeli relation will see some sort of quote-unquote Cold War, because we saw the Cold War between Egypt and Israel under first Netanyahu government.
Ambassador David Mack, staying with this concept of maybe it's better that there's a right-wing government, more true to itself perhaps, than a left-wing government in Israel that talks peace and does the opposite. What about that concept?
Well, I'm not an expert on Israeli politics, but certainly, as Dan Diker knows, Netanyahu is a skillful politician in many respects. He has a pretty broad coalition here in the sense that he has labor members such as Defense Minister Ehud Barak, and he clearly is going to have some things to think about in terms of his coalition after he has his visits to both Cairo, the most important neighbor it has in security terms, and to Washington, a country that, because the United States relationship with Israel is very key to Israel's security over the longer term, it's essential. I think he may well, as Mr. Imad Gad suggests, want to shift his coalition into the center, to bring in Kadima, and to have a different approach to these problems, because certainly the going-in position, as was suggested by Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman, is not a position that is going to be productive, and it's simply going to lead to a downward spiral of violence.
Okay, let's make that the final thought, because we have run out of time. Okay, wait, let me get a final thought from Dan Diker. Then, Dan Diker, you want to come in very quickly, please, sir.
I believe that they have a lot to talk about. I do think that we should de-link the Palestinian issue for the good of the Palestinians themselves from the Iranian issue. The Palestinian issue is a very complicated issue. It is a very destabilized area, and we will all have to work together to help our Palestinian neighbors secure the area and come to freedom and independence. That's in everyone's interest.
Okay, you got your point across. Thank you very much. In Cairo, Imad Gad. In Jerusalem, Dan Diker. And in Washington, D.C., Ambassador David Mack. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. And thank you so much, the viewer, for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments, your suggestions, even your questions. You can email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye-bye for now.